I think I'm going to go ahead and do this before I lose my nerve. So, get out my pieces here. I just want to talk a little bit about failure for a minute. Where am I at? 16 seconds. Alright. 60 seconds. Failures are going to happen. You live off grid. You're not adhering to the status quo. And your life is basically ruled by Mother Nature. Failures are going to happen. Okay? It's just the way it is. Am I coming in clearly? I can't even tell anymore. So, with these wood blanks that I have, and this one actually looks like it's pretty solid on the surface, right? But even so, I can look in here and I can see little teeny tiny cracks running down everywhere. And as you can see, it's splintering pretty badly all along where I cut it. And on the end, there are, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's little checks, okay? So these are cracks where during the drying process the wood opened up. Some of them closed back up, some of them not so much. I'm trying to find some good examples here, but yeah, there's some right there. There's a little checking, and it's hard to tell the checking from the splinters at this point until you smooth it out. So the entire time I was carving my axe handle, I've been noticing these little cracks, right, running along the grain, and I would like to say there's a dozen of them that I found, but everything's smooth now. Actually, there's a few running right along next to the split that actually happened. So I took this guy out today. I finally got this section of it thin enough where it's swinging and it feels really, really good, and then does that show up? Yeah, so I cracked it. At this point, I'm almost halfway inclined to say I don't care. Wrap this sucker with duct tape and put some wood glue in there and just keep on cruising, because that'll seal it back up. It'll look dirty as hell, but it'll function for a while. And then once that wood glue sets up, then try again. But there are cracks running all through this board. So I want to point out, this isn't a failure of the wood being oak. It's not a failure of the design or being too thin or anything like that. It actually busted on a run out piece here that just had a crack in it, and while I was shaving this side down, I lifted a splinter, didn't get rid of it, just went out and started chopping with it, and that splinter connected to one of these other cracks and just eventually broke. I'm not even sure when it broke, because I felled a tree with it and I bucked a couple logs, and then while I was limbing that tree, I noticed that it had cracks. There's another one running right through the face here. There's another one running all the way down the seam right here. So there's cracks and checks, and this is a matter of improper curing or not good enough curing. So I don't know a whole lot about curing wood. What I do know is that putting it out in temperature extremes, like it's been in the pole barn all winter, so it's been freezing and thawing, and even both before and after, I split it into staves. And I brought it into the house hoping that these chunks were solid enough to resist further damaging themselves, but they still have checks in them everywhere. So at the moment, I'm not even sure if I want to bother turning these into anything but firewood, which is cool, you know, it happens to the best of us. If I want to make an axe handle at this point, I mean, they say the wood's got to be fully seasoned, so even if I split a brand new log and cover it with wood glue and put it up here in the house where it can cure, you know, in a little more stable temperature environment, which I may do, it's still got to sit around for like a year until all the moisture gets out of it, and it's a very slow process. So yeah, that's it. I mean, things are going to happen. Mistakes are going to be made. This is part of it, and I wanted to make this, I don't want to make this whole channel just about showing my successes, but I want to show a couple of these failures, because failures are going to happen, right? It's best when I got my first kitten, the first thing everybody out here told me all my friends that are into being more off-grid, the off-griddy type friends. Not everybody out here is off-grid, but the ones that I do have, they're like, don't get attached to the cat, because cats go disappearing all the time. Now luckily these four, I still have all four of them. They're running around outside. Pretty soon new dangers are going to show up with spring, so if they level their first year, they'll be good to go. But at the same time, I don't want to get too attached to them, because things can happen. There are a lot of predators out here, and they are not exactly the top of the food chain, even though they're pretty high up on the list. A coyote could snatch one up if it's hungry. You know, if it's that bad of a meal, it'll probably be a bad case of indigestion for the coyote, but you know, that's part of life out here. Even the animals fail sometimes. So don't get discouraged. Keep going. And if you are going to try carving an axe handle by hand, you can save yourself a little trouble by making sure you start off with a good blank of wood. Now I do have some other oak here that is cut in a dimensionally stable fashion that I was going to use for shelves, and it's too skinny, so it's just laying around. I may try making an axe handle out of that and using it. Like I said, I can tape this guy up and probably still get some life out of it. The head's holding on very well. Everything seems to be working, and it's really a joy to chop with. So it would be a shame to just throw this out at this point. Like, I'm not devastated that it's busted up, because this axe has been in out of work condition more than it's been in working condition since I bought it, the original Collins axe. But these things are going to happen, so be ready for them. And just thought I'd share that little failure. But other than that, the axe works great. And if you can thin this down to where you reduce your hand shock, like, it's much better than a blade from the store. And if you buy a blade, an axe handle from the store, you can use these same shaping techniques. Maybe not, don't start with the axe, start with a rasp and just take it down slow. But you thin it out and make it chop the way that you want it to chop, and they'll last a long time too. But eventually, these store-bought handles break too. You know, they're not a complete victory lap. They have their little problems and their lapses as well. So wood's wood, and this is the sacrificial part of the axe, right? And this is the handle. So I'm trying to get better about curing and storing my wood. And this is one of the reasons you can't just go buy like a chainsaw mill and start a wood milling business, because storing the wood and keeping it from checking is a huge part of that business that nobody ever talks about. Everybody talks about the chainsaw mill. Nobody talks about storing the wood and putting it up and keeping it for long times. And these guys have pretty radical procedures for what they go through just to stop this kind of thing from happening. With their lumber that they're trying to sell as lumber, because if this board right here checked on me, I'd probably be hot and go back to the lumber store and be like, dude, this is a defective board. But when you're pulling it out of a tree, you know, I can't go back to the tree and file a complaint with the tree department or with the forest, you know, or Mother Nature. She doesn't care. So this is all on me. But the other thing about failure out here is you embrace failure. I mean, this is 100% my own making. I knew this thing had checks in it. I knew it had cracks in it. I made it anyways, and it was working really, really well. So that's just a part of it. I knew that this wasn't going to last forever. I knew it was going to break. I thought I'd make it through like maybe part of a cordwood challenge, at least start one. And my axe skills are still not that great, that I bust a lot of them up here still from overstriking. So sooner or later this handle was going to break, is the end rule on that. But it's my handle. I made it. It really didn't take that much time, and it's a little more experience every time I do it. Like, every time I make one of these handles, they just look and feel better and better and better. So eventually, by the time I get some wood that's cured properly, I'm going to be able to make a pretty awesome handle. And that handle will probably last me 20 years at that point. I'll never have to make one again. But so experience comes into play too. You know, like this handle. I mean, this is my first one, and it's still hanging on, cut from a chunk of oak that I just managed to magically cure somehow. I guess because I cut it green, and that dealt with a lot of frustration when I was getting it hafted because the head kept falling off. And once it finally dried out and cured all the way, now it's a serviceable hatchet handle, and I use this almost on a daily basis for everything, and that joker just never has any problems. So if I can get the quality of wood up to snuff, and I can continue getting faster and better at carving handles, then this all goes into the experience of one day being able to replace my handles and not have to worry about them breaking right away. So it's just a thing. That's all I want to say. Probably more time than it took me to say it, and I hope that someone out there who's watching my channel can at least appreciate that, you know, if you fail at something, you're not the only one. We all fail. I fail 99 times for every time I succeed. I'm still busting pottery. Have not fired a single piece that's up to my standards yet. And that has to do with the clay, the firing process, the drying process, the throwing process. Like, everything goes into it. It's not one skill to just make a, you know, a primitive pot. It's a whole bunch of skills. And there's women in Africa that are almost 100 years old that have been doing this their entire life, and they're still doing it, so they make it look easy. That's it. If you fail, you're not alone. Failure's part of learning, so keep failing, I guess, like me. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get on about my night. I've got a million other things to do, so I'm not going to be, you know, crying my eyes out over this. I actually still think this is a very serviceable axe, and I'm going to try and get as much out of it as I can. So I'm just going to put some duct tape on it later and some wood glue, and then when I think the glue is sufficiently strongly held, just take the tape back off, see what I can make out of it. You never know, maybe I can fix some of these checks by filling them with Titebond. And if that works, of course, I'll do another video on that. So, you know, never give up, never stop fighting, and eventually you're going to get tool handles that'll last you a lifetime, like this little guy. I broke the fiberglass handle on this original axe head in a week, by the way, so that's how much I abuse these things. Anyways, I will see you next time. If you don't mind, go ahead and subscribe, or if you're already subscribed, tell your friends to check my channel out, maybe, if they're interested in this kind of stuff. Maybe pick up some more followers, and more followers, the more better, because if I can get this information out and share like life out here with people and give them kind of a real perspective of what's going on like that, that's something I want to do. It's not the only thing I want to do in life, but it's definitely something I want to do. So help me spread the word, and I'll keep making videos.